SMS Hindenburg, or the large cruiser of 1913, was a modified version of the Derfflinger-class, and the last Imperial German battlecruiser, or capital ship for that matter. Like her sister ships Derfflinger and Lützow, she was a very capable ship, being armed with 8 12-inch guns. These turrets were modified in several ways that made them more efficient and effective than their predecessors. The other modifications to the ship's design made her heavier than her sisters. She was commissioned in May of 1917 and, because of that, did not see much of any action during the Great War, even though she participated in sorties, serving as the flagship for the 1st Scouting Group, and for a time Admiral Franz von Hipper. Hindenburg was to be part of the Death Ride of the High Seas Fleet in late October of 1918, which did not come to fruition due to the war weariness of the crews. Along with other members of the 1st Scouting Group, Hindenburg went to the United Kingdom for internment following the signing of the armistice in November 1918. Then, on June 21, 1919, at 11:20 a.m., the order was given from SMS Emden by Admiral Ludwig von Reuter to scuttle the ships under his command, with the first sinking being Friedrich der Grosse and the last being Hindenburg. The wreck of the Hindenburg sat at the bottom of Scapa Flow for over a decade, before she was raised and scrapped between 1931 and 1932. Like the other German battlecruisers, the story of the Hindenburg starts a year earlier in 1912 under the name Hertha, where the large cruiser of 1913 was discussed in a meeting on May 31, 1912. Several proposed modifications to the ship were discussed, including new rangefinders like the ones found in the new battleships Bayern and Baden, new turret construction, the reorganization of the engineering spaces, an increase in the number of 15cm or 5.9-inch guns from 14 to 18, the reduction of the 88mm guns from 12 to 8, improvements to the torpedo battery, including the removal of the stern tube and it being replaced by 2 aft tubes on a different angle, along with an increase in speed and armor protection. Now, not all of these changes were adopted, and in German battlecruisers of World War I, their design, construction, and operations by Gary Staff, His Excellency, the Herr State Secretary Großadmiral von Tirpitz, made the following decisions regarding the proposals. A completely new design, as would be required by an extension of the citadel or casemates or other alterations to the ship's form, should be avoided at all costs. The diesel dynamo should not be moved, as this would require an extension of the citadel. To guard against fires, the diesel oil stock should be reduced and insulated. The number of 15cm guns should not exceed 14, and 8.8cm guns should be 8. The munitions outfit for the 8.8cm guns would remain 250 shots per gun. The armament would be as for Ersatz Kaiserin Augusta. Other ideas were taken into consideration for the new ship, like the reduction in the thickness of the bow armor to compensate for the weight increase due to the new turret construction, along with the considerations for an increase in the size of the main battery to 35cm or 15-inch guns. The cost and size increases required for such a change was not acceptable for the time being. Still, several changes did occur that were approved by the Kaiser in April of 1913. These being, 1, a quick-loading device for the broadside torpedoes was installed, which consequently meant the armored deck above the broadside room was set higher by half a meter. 2, a searchlight was added to the foremast. 3, the middle passageway was laid out for better isolation of the 15cm munitions chambers lying in the boiler bunkers. 4, the ventilators for the boiler rooms were all, apart from 2, below the armored deck, for the greater part in the boiler bunkers. 5, the crew number was increased by 50. 6, the central superstructure on the upper deck was lengthened for better cabin accommodation. The armor of the Hindenburg was similar to that of the Derfflinger. However, the sloping of the turret roofs was 150mm instead of the 110mm found in the Derfflinger. Bow armor was changed along with changes to the forwardmost armor, being thicker and attached through riveting instead of bolting. As I mentioned in the introduction, the armament of Hindenburg was different from that of the other two in this class, differing in several ways. The turret hood was done away with, and only one bearing telescope between the two guns. The manual backup for the traversing of the turret was replaced by an auxiliary electric drive. This performed better than the previous manual drive. Again, taking from Gary's staff here, the elevation of the guns was negative 5.5 degrees to 16.5 degrees from the outset. The major difference in the turrets compared to the Derfflinger and Lützow was that all the turrets were arranged with elevators, same as the 4 turrets on those ships. The shell elevators ran from the shell loading position to a position between the barrels in the vicinity of the locks. The shell was pushed by a mechanical reloader to the aft onto a loading tray, which swung the shell behind the breech. A hydraulic rammer pushed home the shell. Each elevator could service either gun. Another important change was the streamlining of those elevators servicing the guns. saving weight and increasing the speed of the loading. Hindenburg's machinery was similar to that of Derfflinger and Lutzow. The changes made were in the arrangement of the boilers and where the coal-fired boilers versus the pure oil-fired ones were on the ship. As for her particulars, she was laid down on October 1st, 1913, launched on August 1st, 1915, and commissioned on May 10th, 1917. Having a design displacement of 26,947 tons and a full load displacement of 31,500 tons. Her machinery consisted of 2 sets of turbines and 4 turbine rooms, with high-pressure turbines driving the outer shafts and the low-pressure set driving the inboard shafts. Steam was provided by 14 coal-fired and 4 pure oil-fired boilers, giving her design maximum shaft horsepower of 72,000 and an actual maximum of 95,777. For design top speed of 26.6 knots, and essentially the same maximum on her trials. Her armament consisted of 8 30.5 centimeter or 12-inch guns and twin turrets, 2 turrets forward and 2 turrets aft. The secondary battery was made up of 14 15 centimeter or 5.9-inch guns and casemates, and the light artillery consisted of 4 88mm flat guns grouped around the forefunnel. Rounding out the armament were 4 torpedo tubes and an increase in the number of torpedoes carried. Typically, I would go over the armor scheme of the ship. Since it's so similar to Derfflinger or Lutzow, I will put a link to those videos now instead. Hindenburg had some interesting features, like having a tripod mast with only Blücher, Derfflinger, Bayern, and Baden carrying these types of masts, while the style was very popular with the Royal Navy. Another interesting feature was that, as designed, Hindenburg could carry a twin-engine float plane on either side adjacent to the aft funnel, and using a derrick, the aircraft could be raised out of and lowered to the water. Something that I think should be explained is the white rings on B and C turrets, as I've previously questioned why they are there in the past. Well, it's a pretty mundane explanation, as they are a recognition device for the pilots flying above the ship. Lastly, the namesake of the ship should be mentioned, as it is named after Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg. At the time of the ship's commissioning, he was the commander of the Supreme Army Command, and here he is with the first captain of the Hindenburg, the very experienced Captain Kopf. Since the ship started construction in October of 1913, once war broke out, the construction was delayed because the dockyard had higher priorities. Only on August 1st, 1915, the ship was launched with little ceremony, and on May 10th, 1917, she was commissioned into the Imperial Navy as the last dreadnought ship. I would normally discuss her trials, but a detailed trials report that the other large cruisers have is not available. After commissioning, she lay in the Imperial dockyard at Wilhelmshaven for 2 weeks to take on munitions and coal. Finally, on May 22nd, she ran out of the lock at Wilhelmshaven Roads to determine compass deviation to carry out maneuvers and to move to Kiel. On the 30th of May, Hindenburg left Kiel at 7 a.m. to begin trials, and over the next several weeks, the engines, armaments, and other aspects of the ship were tested. There were some kinks to work out with the cool waters for the condensers and the traversal of C and D turrets. These trials continued through June and July, with the ship performing well in the artillery and torpedo trials. On July 18th, Hindenburg carried out training with the first scouting group. After further dockyard work, more trials continued, and on August 20th, 1917, she was detached from trials. However, further training continued. During August and September, Hindenburg carried out individual training consisting of weapons training with artillery and torpedoes during the day and night. Finally, on October 9th, she ran out of Mecklenburg Bight with Seydlitz, Derfflinger, and von der Tann to conduct torpedo firing with Baden in the 2nd Division. The ships did training in the Bight for 2 days before returning to Wilhelmshaven. The first scouting group under Vice Admiral Hipper carried out more drills in the Baltic, while other groups of the High Seas Fleet helped in the conquest of Russian territory. In early November, Hindenburg was on picket duty, and on November 17 she was at Schilling Roads when the cruiser Königsberg sent a message stating that enemy forces were nearby, this being the Second Battle of Heligoland Bight. So at 8:55 a.m., Hindenburg was ordered to steam up with all boilers. By 10:45 a.m., Hindenburg, in company with Moltke, was traveling towards the cruisers and other small craft. Half an hour later, as Hindenburg reached her top speed of 26 knots, Moltke began to fall behind because her highest speed at the time was 23 knots. Soon, other capital ships of the High Seas Fleet came out, and Vice Admiral Ludwig von Reuter, in charge of the 2nd Scouting Group, ordered Hindenburg and Moltke to attach behind the battleships and help them engage the British ships. But before the battlecruisers could assist in the battle, they were ordered to retire back to Schilling Roads. April brought the ship the opportunity for action, as on the 23rd, a major fleet operation was planned against Allied convoy traffic between Norway and the Shetland Islands. It was hoped to intercept an isolated battle squadron and bring them to battle, a strategy the Germans had been trying to use since the war's beginning to whittle down the numerical superiority of the Grand Fleet. For this operation, Hindenburg served as flagship for Admiral Hipper, and the first scouting group departed Schilling Roads at 5 a.m. on the 23rd, but due to fog and poor weather conditions, the ships were forced to anchor and wait until the following day. The following morning, Moltke was detached because of engine damage, which became so bad the first scouting group had to reverse course and assist the crippled battlecruiser. This was effectively the end of the operation as they escorted Moltke back to home waters, and Hindenburg returned to Germany on the 27th, where she remained on picket duty until May 9th. The 10th saw Hindenburg and the 1st Scouting Group conduct a special operation to cover the 2nd Scouting Group as they laid a defensive mine barrier. Once support was taken over by the battleships, the 1st Scouting Group returned to port late in the month. June was very similar to the previous several months, with regular shooting practice and other drills with the 1st Scouting Group, along with several operations to sweep mines. Early August saw the ship in dock for regular work, and after it was returned to picket duty. After an attempt to sweep mines was called off on July 29th, 1st Scouting Group covered another special operation to clear British mines and allow a U-boat a free passage to the open sea. The minesweeping operation concluded after one minesweeper struck a mine and sank. The ships returned to Germany on August 1st, and on August 11th, Hipper was promoted to command of the High Seas Fleet, so Vice Admiral Ludwig von Reuter took over as the commander of the battlecruisers. Von Reuter raised his flag on Hindenburg and put the ships of the 1st Scouting Group to work, having them training for the remainder of the month. Now, von Reuter did not get his chance to do battle with the Royal Navy. Nothing major happened until the 30th of October 1918, where she ran out to Schilling Roads, ready for an impending operation where she was to serve as flagship for the 1st Scouting Group. This was to be the death ride of the High Seas Fleet. The operation was meant to lure out the Grand Fleet from Scapa Flow and use all available means at the disposal of the High Seas Fleet to destroy the Grand Fleet. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, who led the German fleet at Jutland, now promoted, approved Hipper's plan, as both admirals hoped that in addition to salvaging the honor of the German Navy, a tactical success might reverse the military position and avert surrender. This was not to be, as the admirals had not taken into consideration the war weariness and defeatism of their sailors, who did not want to necessarily die in an all-out battle that would most likely not have changed the outcome of the war. In the ensuing mutiny, Hipper had to call off the operation. By this point, the armistice was less than 2 weeks away. It was agreed that Hindenburg and a majority of the High Seas Fleet would be interned in the United Kingdom. Initially, the ships were brought to the Firth of Forth and transferred to Scapa Flow later. The unenviable task of command over these vessels was given to Admiral Ludwig von Reuter, and in the ensuing months, the condition the crews found themselves in was not ideal, wherein Robert K. Massey describes the scene perfectly. For 7 months, the 74 interred German ships became a part of the landscape of Scapa Flow. Their crews were demoralized and apathetic. Discipline was loose and unwieldy. Even Reuter's orders had to be countersigned by the Soldiers' Council. Sailors got up late, did little work, and lounged on the deck, smoking in officers' presence. Cleaning was abandoned, and the mess deck was so deep in filth that German officers blushed when British officers came on board. Some destroyers, infested by rats, were left unoccupied. Neither officer nor men were allowed to go ashore. To cope with the monotony, sailors fished, wrote letters, played chess, gambled, sang, and danced. Food was adequate. The British insisted that all of it come from Germany, and supplies were brought from Wilhelmshaven twice a month, so the catching of fish and seagulls was more for diversion than nourishment. German seamen received 300 cigarettes or 75 cigars per month, and a generous allotment of alcohol. There were doctors in the fleet, but no dentist, and the British refused to provide one. Men with decayed teeth or broken dentures had priority in going home. 2 German chaplains, a Protestant and a Roman Catholic, served the entire fleet. Outgoing mail to Germany was censored, later incoming also. Only British newspapers were allowed on board, and these were delivered 4 days late. Communication between German ships was by flag or signal light only. No visiting between ships was permitted. It was prohibited even to lower a boat, at the risk of being fired upon. Things got so bad, Reuter had to transfer his flag to the light cruiser Emden because sailors who were part of the group called the Red Guard kept the admiral up all night by pounding on the steel deck over the admiral's cabin where he was trying to sleep. Taking this into account, and the fear that the British might try to seize the ships as peace talks continued in Paris, Reuter began to set a plan in motion to scuttle the ships that were still ostensibly under his command. The plan came to a head on Saturday, June 21st, 1919, when Reuter sent the decisive signal at 11:20 a.m. The battleship Friedrich der Grosse was the first ship to go down, and over the next 5 hours, one by one, the Kaiser's fleet went to the bottom. The last ship to go down was the Hindenburg at 5 p.m. There were several attempts to raise Hindenburg in 1925, but only on the 24th of July, 1930 was this successfully accomplished. On August 23rd, the Todorov Scythe was begun. The ship was broken up between 1931 and 1932. Like my videos on Derfflinger and Lutzow, I'll leave you with a quote as I think it's an appropriate end. The quote coming from German battlecruisers of World War I. The final design of Derfflinger was a striking ship, and with it, German shipbuilders reached a pinnacle as far as completed Panzerkreuzer battlecruisers were concerned. This class of 3 ships is often regarded as the best all-around capital ship of the period, and aesthetically is amongst the most handsome. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe as it'll help the channel to grow. And until next time, my friends, have a great day.